I always tell you should go to a song after the
No, we can't.
Okay, well I can't put on my mic then. I can't put on the video then.
I can't go to a song.
Well, I can't put on my video just yet. That's all I'm saying. That's all.
No, that is not what we do here. All right. We cannot stream music, Richard. That's why.
Oh, y'all started the one time. The YouTube stream.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
So we cannot play music. So that is why we do not
I
play
forgot
music.
about that. No, Ruben did put that in the group at some
You
point.
need to remember these things. We just say it once. You also always remember. That's right. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Cannot
you're right.
stream.
That was put in
We
the
are
group.
streaming now, so you need to put on your camera while Minister Gonzalez is logging on.
Oh, is he? Okay, cool.
Yeah, he's logging on now. He's going to log on in about 10 seconds or so. We should see him. And yeah, we're going to talk about that.
But he could give us an update with regard to what's going on with Wassa.
There's a lot of updates at Luasa and TN Tech. I know Tobago
I
had
didn't get the sense that many people were affected by the I didn't get a sense that people were affected so much from an electricity point of view, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Up to last evening, I know Chaguanas area was in darkness. Tobago had some outages night before. Yeah, there were some outages, but I know TN Tech, they, in order to restore, they can't do it in the rain. So that's why.
Okay, because you generally didn't think, but I know Tobago was more affected than Trinidad was. So you don't have a sense. Well, Grand Riviera obviously was affected yesterday.
Yeah.
Because there was more of a weather event actually yesterday for most of Trinidad than there was for the day of the storm.
Yeah.
So there was much more rain. There was much more rain yesterday.
The potential cyclone, there was no storm.
Yeah.
Stormy weather. We call it stormy weather rather than storm. Okay, Paul?
Inclement adverse weather.
Stormy weather.
This is a potential cyclone.
I'm saying stormy weather. I'm not saying it's a storm. Anyway, yesterday had much more adverse weather
We had more rain yesterday.
than the day that people were prepping for. I was in Westmore yesterday, and one of the girls in the kiosk had stopped to ask about a ring light. And so she was just talking. But I mean, I talk to her sometimes. We talk sometimes when I'm in Westmore. She's
Recording in
she comes to
progress.
theater sometimes now, and she was telling me that her neighbor bought boxes and boxes of cricks and boxes and cases and cases and cases of water, and she said she just went overboard. And she's saying, but you have enough water and cricks, you could fuel plenty wake because you have so much cricks and water. And so she telling her, the neighbor telling her, when she in Westmore, if anybody need water or cricks, she could send them by.
Good morning, Minister Gonzalez.
Hi, good morning, Senator Richards.
Morning.
Oh, it's so formal.
you know,
good morning,
I'm just-
good morning, Senator Richards. It's not me that's summoning you to the Senate, you know. It's your partner. Your partner is summoned you.
He was summoned.
I
Yeah, every week he gets summoned to the Senate. Every week.
have a next one to respond to this afternoon.
He's a member of the lower house, but he always in the upper house. I don't know. Always, every week. I said, what
So what happens? So what happens if you get summoned and you do not pay?
Somebody else is reading the report. So, but he like to appear every week. Every week in the Senate.
I want to do my own work. I want to
You
do
understand? I said, but he here again for.
But you know, Richard, coming back to this girl with buying cricks. Mind you, I believe cricks is going up from tomorrow. It is good to see that the population took heed and prepared. It's good to see that the authorities came out in the way in which they did, in which our poll from yesterday indicated that they were prepared. But it's good to see that. I'm just hoping that the season is still young and it's still early.
Our question yesterday, Minister Gonzalez, was did the authorities adequately prepare the population for the possible cyclone, and the answer was overwhelmingly yes. So kudos to you and
79% said yes.
your colleagues.
Well, I think the government, when the Prime Minister, the acting Prime Minister, saw the impending adverse weather condition, he put together a ministerial team. He immediately put together a ministerial team to prepare the country and to ensure that we have this seamless, interagency collaboration in order to prepare the country for the worst of it. We were actually preparing for the worst of it, and it worked out very well. It was very seamless. We exchanged information. We were in contact with each other. We were in contact with the Met Office, getting up-to-date information. And as we get all the up-to-date information, it was immediately relayed to the population. For me, I just entered government and politics, and it's my first experience, and I must say it was indeed a very good experience. And with the support that we've gotten from the Met Office and all of the other public agencies, ODPM, TSTT, etc. I'm very gratified that people responded positively, seriously, and it shows that as a country, once we get rid of all the noise and all the clutter, we can do the right thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, and the hurricane season, so even though, thank God, although I see strangely enough complaining that the storm didn't come. Trinidad is sweet, yes. Like some of them vex the storm didn't come.
Yeah, it is crazy, and I'll tell you this, I don't know if you all heard the news conference I had yesterday. The northeast part of Trinidad, northern part of Trinidad, especially in the rainforest, they were really battered. And a lot of the rivers, were overwhelmed, and Wassa surface water facilities became overwhelmed. They had to literally shut down. Rivers rose very high, especially in the Grand River area. So a number of people in Northeast Trinidad are out of water today. And thankfully, when I contacted my parliamentary colleague last night, Roger Monroe, he told me that the weather conditions were improving significantly. And I feel very happy about that, because I know it will now allow the authority to commence their restoration work and the repair work on those surface water plants, so that we can have a full restoration of water supply in those communities.
The media today indicated that there were about 16 facilities affected by water facilities that were affected, and there was a timeline given of 12 to 24 hours to get people back to some level of service. Is it confirmed that people will be restored today?
Well, everything is premised upon the weather conditions and the fact that and whether the weather condition improved, because about 5 facilities were restored yesterday before lunchtime, and in about an hour's time after full restoration, they had to be shut down again because the rains came and silted water started flowing back into the plants. So the anticipated full restoration of those plants, it was premised on the fact that the weather condition improved. And once it is improved, then the authority can now safely go in and start clearing all the debris and the silt from these ponds, and to return those facilities back into operation. So by lunchtime, we would be able to report to the country how many of those facilities are back, and an anticipated timeline for bringing back all of the facilities. But I've asked WASA to mobilize all their resources, human, equipment, etc., and have those resources deployed to all the facilities so that we can get them back into operation within the shortest possible time. But remember, water is not like electricity, where you can just put on a switch, and then electricity moves with lightning speed. Water is different. It has to be transmitted. It goes into your distribution grid. It goes into your transmission grid. It requires power. It requires PSIs, pressures, etc. It had to be built up, and then those communities on the lower line, the lower areas, they will get their supply first. And once they get their supply, you have to shut them off in order to build additional pressure to get the water to the highest point. So when you have these types of interruption, it could be very inconveniencing where water is concerned because of the whole hydrology and the whole nature of how water is actually distributed. So it can really take up to 48 hours or more to really regularize and for people to start getting that sense of normalcy in their water supply.
Doesn't that come from a misconception that, well, plenty rain falling, but we still on the water? Because there's the added issue you spoke just now, because the devices are mechanical, the equipment is mechanical, and the rainwater and the surface water now is mixed with mud and slush, which has to be filtered, and it's not just as simple as rainfall, water come down, water in your pipes.
And that's the reason why I decided to have that news conference yesterday, because it's just hearing in my head, the complaints of, from citizens that, all this rain is falling and we can't get water in our pipes, where all the water going and what have you. It's simply because people don't understand how water is extracted, how water is treated, transmitted, and distributed. I took the opportunity yesterday to have the engineers from WASA explain to people that you have groundwater sources from your wells, which are very much resilient to climatic conditions, weather conditions, because the water is actually extracted from your underground aquifers. So whether you have flood, whether you have dry season conditions, your aquifers are not easily impacted. So let me just make a comparison. In West Trinidad, the water supply is is quite normal. But in East Trinidad, we have a widespread disruption, because in West Trinidad, most of their water supply is from ground or well water sources. In East Trinidad, most of the water is from surface water sources. You talk about North Urupuch producing daily 20 imperial million gallons of water. You talk about Hollis, 9 imperial million gallons of water. You have Aripo, you have Guanapo, all of these very rich water sources. And most of the communities in East Trinidad, over 300,000 customers rely on those surface water sources. But those surface water sources are very vulnerable to climatic conditions. In heavy rain, extreme rain, silt go, and you have to shut down the plants to protect the equipment, protect the health of citizens, because you don't want dirty water flowing into people's taps. And in the dry season, quite the opposite happens, because our river levels drop considerably during the dry season, and you have those plants producing, below their design capacity. So once people understand this, they will have a better appreciation as to why you conserve water, why you have this kind of impact, depending on, whatever the weather condition might be. And what we are also trying to do, sorry about Paul, but a very important point, and this is what I'm hoping that I get the time to do, is to increase storage capacity. You see, too many times the water is treated from the plants and immediately sent into your distribution grid and people's home. But if we have sufficient storage around the country, strategically placed around the country, then customers will not feel the direct impact of weather conditions, because you might have 2 or 3 days or perhaps 5 days of storage that customers can continue to get a regular supply, whilst the authority address the problems that may occur on its plants. So if we have sufficient storage to perhaps keep us, with a regular supply for about 4 or 5 days, then it will give the authority that flexibility, that buffer, and that room to treat with the issues on the plants without customers feeling the direct impact of adverse weather conditions.
Has WASA started to ramp up those types of storage facilities?
Well, that is part of what I'm doing is I'm designing regional plans, and I'm hoping that very soon we can talk more about it. So we have done and launched the Northwest Water Improvement Program, and the boots will be hitting the ground from next week, I'm told, where we are targeting communities with a water supply of 24/4. But part of those plans is the full restoration of storage reservoirs or storage tanks that went out of operation for many years. I can tell you that in about 2 weeks, we will be commissioning or recommissioning a new storage reservoir in the Cameron Maraval area. That storage reservoir was constructed in 1984, 200,000 gallons of water, designed to hold 200,000 gallons of water. It was built in 1984, and guess what? It was never used. So we are now, we have recommissioned it, we've, put it onto the transmission distribution system, and it will be used for the very first time. And we have identified a number of storage reservoirs in that regional plan in Northwest Trinidad, where we're going to bring them back into operation so that it can give the authority and customers, that buffer when you have interruptions taking place on the plants, on the distribution and the transmission, whatever the case may be. Currently,
Not meaning to be let's say jealous of Northwest Trinidad, but you indicated that Northeast Trinidad has the problem with regard to the surface water issue with regard to weather, and Northwest doesn't. Wouldn't it have been better to have started the recommissioning or the rollout of storage facilities in Northeast, since they have the more immediate problem?
Fair question. The Northeast plant is more below Northeast. Challenges are more, how should I say, intractable, and it is more expansive when compared to Northwest. And I had a team that was, working longer than the team from Northwest, putting together that Northeast program. The Northwest program is about $60 million. I can tell you the indicative figures I'm seeing for Northeast is about $150 million because of the problems in Northeast. You're talking about Grande, Toko, Central Arima, and all of this very populated Malabar, the Hocketa, and what have you. So the plan took longer than the other regional plans, but the good news is that I received a finalized version last night. I'm currently reviewing it, and I intend to take it to cabinet within the next week or 2 weeks, designed specifically to address some of the problems that we have with respect to Northeast Trinidad and the need for storage, the need to expand groundwater sources, the need to automate a lot of WASA's network and what have you. Very, very impressive plan. But what I like about it is that it is targeted towards addressing specific issues and concerns in the various regions. So, Richard, you always talk about the issue of Central Arima. I can tell you the plan is targeted towards treating with those issues. And what we're attempting to do is to eliminate water schedule that is below 24.3. So once your community is receiving a water schedule that is below 24.3, the plan is designed to ensure that every community in every region in Trinidad and Tobago receive a minimum of 24.3, and to bring them up to a better level of service where the distribution of water is concerned. So the plans are very, very targeted, because it makes absolutely no sense that you spend limited financial resources in a community that already getting a 24/5, 24/6, or 24/7 water supply, which could in the past. So the limited financial resources that we are getting, the support we're getting from the IDB and CAF, we are targeting communities that have a very poor water supply and bring them up to an acceptable level.
How much of the issues of infrastructure is exacerbated by this kind of weather? I know in the past you'd have spoken about the issue related to we make enough water, we collect enough water, we process enough water, but we have distribution issues across different parts of the country to different levels. And now you have this kind of weather, which in some cases, as you said, if the pumps are turned back on, if the processing plants are turned back on, it can damage the equipment.
Yeah. So, and that's the reason why WASA has to take action to shut down those plants, because if they don't, a lot of your pumps will be damaged. A lot of your filters and the filtration process, they will be damaged, and the repercussions, are going to be very, very profound if you don't take these types of action. So I have not received any reports of damaged pumps, because WASA, we had, with the impending weather condition, what we did is that we deployed plant operators with their torchlights, their batteries, diesel, extra diesel, and we put the necessary things in place. And so all of those plants were manned with operators so that they can take the appropriate action to protect the plants and to protect the assets, the pumps, etc. So I have not received any reports of damaged pumps, but I don't anticipate to receive those types of reports because the appropriate action was taken when the river level started rising and the silt started flowing into the catchment area.
Has the truck-borne supply been initiated, to supply to those areas that have not had a resumption yet?
Oh, yes. So, unfortunately, you're talking about 200,000 customers outside of water. It is, let's be frank, it is not possible to provide truck-borne supply of water to 200,000 customers. So, what we are trying to do is to ensure that our hospitals, our schools, our community centers, and all those public institutions, they have sufficient access to water so that other public services can continue to be provided to the people. And on a limited basis, we will, target areas that where you have older people, elderly homes, etc. So it's very, very challenging. It is not possible to provide truck-borne supply to 200,000 people, and that's the reason why now that we're having an improvement in weather conditions, the first priority is to get those plants up and running so that we don't have citizens experiencing this prolonged effect of not having a supply of water.
Yeah, but let me ask you about this truck-borne water, because when Barataria didn't have water, a truck passed and said that we have to pay for the water, $400 for water. What is that about?
It has to be a private company, because if it's WASA, you don't pay for water. As a matter of fact, all WASA approved trucks they're all labeled free water. So, but there are a number of private companies that try to capitalize on opportunities like that to get people to pay for water, especially if they recognize that based on the situation, whatever the situation that the authority might be experiencing, some people will just go for the option of purchasing their water. So
they can't wait. They can't wait on water for 2 days, 3 days to get water. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wouldn't. Some people will just wait, and they will purchase water from private. This is very dangerous, however, because we don't know where they're getting their water. We don't know if their tanks are properly sanitized, and so we tend to caution people to be very careful when purchasing water from private operators.
And much about point two, and allegedly, private companies run by WASA employees, but we'll move on. We'll digress.
I'm going to respond.
Can you give us an update?
I find it sound like we bug it.
I was never that. Anyway, I'm going to say that. Somebody recording this somewhere and they go say,
all right, sorry.
I'm misbehaving. These people get to pull up right, left, and center. Anyway, we've spoken extensively in the past about the transformation plan for WASA. WASA is going through some tumultuous CEO issues. Could you give us an update on the plan, which was, I guess, supposed to have been, and you sent it to cabinet. I think it may have been approved, and what the status of that is presently, while even all this is going on.
Yeah, the plan is completed. I'm been in contact with the Honorable Acting Prime Minister on it. I know the substantive Prime Minister, he returns to the country today. So as Minister, just before the substantive left, he asked for certain adjustments to be made, and those adjustments were made to the plan. And therefore, as soon as he's back, I'm just awaiting his guidance in terms of when we go to the population to inform the population of government's policy with respect to the restructuring and or transformation of the Water and Sewage Authority. So I'm just, at this point in time, waiting on their directive to report to the country on what our plans are for the transformation of WASA.
Do you think that is likely, and I know I'm putting in an awkward position here, but we have a budget coming up just now again. The Parliament goes on recess next week, and then it'll come back, and then I think the third session of the 12th Parliament starts, and there's been a lot of discussion about this transformation plan for WASA. Mm-hmm. And, well, A lot of transformation going because you have transmission at TSTT2. TNTech seems to be the only stable entity, and TT Post among all of these.
Yeah, they're
So,
going to do this right now.
I mean, your portfolio is pretty challenging. Is it likely that WASA transformation plan will be approved and initiated in time to have budgetary allocations for it? Because I'm sure that will be a consideration.
Must, because we certainly cannot continue the same model going into the new financial year, certainly. And that's the reason why the government's intention is to ensure that this transformation begins, the process for implementing this transformation starts within this current financial year. So that moving into the new financial year and you start to look at your budget, your projections, and what have you, you will take into consideration, well, the motion and the activities of transformation would have already been started. So that's the plan.
And TSTT, which is and I know it is a process that is on train now with the retrenchment of, depending on who you listen to, 500 or so employees and the restructuring of TSTT.
About 360 employees.
360 employees, and the impact on that entity. It seems, because I've been hearing reports from sources, that there are disruptions in service that are taking very long to be repaired because some of the staff who received retrenchment notices, for example, the Tobago situation recently where there was some break in service and it took as much as 2 weeks to be repaired, which I saw people posting on social media that the service level and the response level is terribly inadequate, and people are linking it, whether accurately so or not, to the restructuring and the retrenchment exercise going on. Is everything all right? Is it stable?
Everything is all right. I'm not aware of that situation in Tobago, but the management of the transformation, the transition that is taking place, everything was set into motion and put in place to manage this very difficult part of the utilities existence. A lot of the interruption that we're having, Paul, I must say, is as a result of the widespread vandalism that is taking place on TSTT's copper network. And in recent times, what I've been told is that even its fiber optic cables are being attacked because some of the vandals, they don't know the difference between the copper and the fiber, and so the fiber cables are being attacked as well. And so it's very unfortunate that a lot of customers are now feeling the effects of this widespread vandalism that is taking
While
place.
I hear you on that, and I know you're not the minister of a private sector competitive entity, but people are naturally going to compare TSTT service to digital service, which seems unaffected by all of this.
I honestly don't think so. Paul, I'm a digital customer, and I will not comment on that. But yes, I understand the concerns of citizens, and based on the reports that I have from the management and the board, TSTT is dealing with the issues that it is faced with respect to cable vandalism and what have you. But insofar as the retrenchment and the restructuring is concerned, the reports that I have at my disposal doesn't in any way suggest that it is impacting TSTT's operation.
Well, when you look at social media, and I mean, it's not an accurate indication. You get a sense that people are unhappy. Is the committee? Because I remember it may have been the Prime Minister, I may be wrong, put together a committee to ascertain if TSTT was fit for purpose. I didn't understand what that meant. Has that been completed? What does that mean? And how does that reconcile with the ongoing transformation and retrenchment process of TSTT as an entity? As an important entity at that, because I think TSTT is also an essential service as a state telecom network provider.
Yeah. So first to begin, the work of the committee has no relation to the ongoing restructuring that is taking place. As a matter of fact, the work of the committee will take into consideration the effects and or impact of the current restructuring that is, but it has no relation whatsoever. The government and the Prime Minister is of the view that the government needs to look at the operation of TSTT in this space and to make a determination whether or not it's in the public interest and it is in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago for the government to continue to have and to hold 51% shareholding in the company. So, given what has been taking place in the telecommunications sector and in that space, locally, regionally, and internationally, the government was of the view that we're at a time where we need to look at TSTT, its operations, look at its infrastructure, look at its HR structure, etc., look at its business model, and to make a determination whether it will serve the government's interests to continue to hold 51% shareholding in the company, whether the people of Trinidad and Tobago will benefit from the government continuing to hold 51% shareholding in the company, or whether or not it should be a privately run entity like Digicel. Because if people are believing that they're getting the best service from Digicel, perhaps that might be the case. But if you look at Digicel operating model, I'm telling you, the people who are touting Digicel's best service may not support the government if the government were to design TSTT's business model similar to that of Digicel.
That's an interesting exploration you've entered into here. The government is the committee's task is to determine whether or not the government thinks that it is in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago to continue holding 51% share in a telecom company post-COVID, when telecom companies are exponentially growing, when telecom provides the backbone digital services for most operations, when the government has a ministry of digital transformation and is digitizing the countries or digitalizing the country's services provision. That's an interesting question. That, to me, is not an issue of viability of a telecom network. It's an issue of whether or not the company is performing adequately, and that's a really serious question.
Of course, it is a very serious question, but Paul, let me tell you this. Does the government need to have ownership in a company in order for that company to be sustainable?
The government just paid $300 and something million for Amplia as part of TSTT's assets. So that's an interesting proposition or question after the government has so significantly invested in a private sector company to bring it into the TSTT fold. It sounds almost strange to me.
Well, that was the government, or was that TSTT?
That's TSTT's decision.
Well,
yeah. You can't merge the two. They're not the same thing.
It was not government's decision, Paul. It was not government's policy. To me, that is entirely a commercial decision that was taken, that occurred. That was made by a commercial entity. Now remember, the government holds 51% share, and that's the reason why TSTT operates as a business. It operates as a private sector company, and it has to be managed in order to make and to return an investment on behalf of its shareholders.
To be competitive.
And to be competitive, exactly. So,
well, I mean, I hear you, Minister, and I think the issue of the state retaining the majority shareholding in what is obviously a private enterprise utility in 2022 is something that really has to be questioned deeply, because I think the philosophical underpinnings of the state involvement in the telecommunications sector goes back to 1962. Where they felt that they needed to have control, that they had to have the communication links of the country to the outside world needed to be under government control. It was a kind of, if you want to call it security or insecurity of newly independent governments, that they felt they needed to have these badges of control.
But in today's world, telecom and connectivity is part of national security.
Yes, but the world is so much more interconnected now that the state doesn't really have to be involved in this, because the private sector has now done it across the globe and at really good price points.
How many telecom companies the government of America own? You understand? I'm just throwing that out there. And Paul, wise, I understand there are a lot of merits to the points that Paul is raising, and that's the reason why, with the government, after how many years of TSTT's existence and so many different iterations of its existence, the government continued to hold. But we have, at some point in time, need to make a decision whether the rationale for owning the assets of the business, is in the state's best interest. I mean, I think it's a legitimate question, and I'm of the view, when you look at productivity, when you look at companies that evolve and remain relevant and become profitable, they are privately run companies.
What you're essentially saying is that maybe the state can't competitively run, but state interest can't competitively run in the free market environment.
Something like that. You have to look at it.
That's a sad indictment on us as a state.
No, I don't think it's a sad indictment, Paul. I think the state really is not the best operator of private sector businesses. It's not. Because politics comes into it, decisions come into it that are not based on the matrix of business and the entrepreneurial class.
Which I agree with you both on that point, for the simple reason that even if a viable, well-designed plan comes into play, state entities or partially entities with partial state ownership are at the behest of changing governments and changing policies, which impact their long-term viability. So I fully get that. I agree with that. So maybe you're right. This question is really at the heart of whether or not the state should be involved in these types of entities, given the political makeup of the country.
And given the industry and the landscape as it is right now, in the telecommunications sector is a sector that hinges, it is a very robust sector. Technology is always driving changes inside of there. And sometimes a lot of our state enterprises and state entities, they are within the clutches of the bureaucracy of politics and what have you, that they cannot evolve as fast as they ought to in order to remain ahead of the game.
Yeah. I'll tell you a problem with TST.
You've convinced me.
I'll tell you something at B-Mobile, because I have a prepaid phone, a B-Mobile prepaid phone, and it had money on it. And the money expired, if you want to call it that. What they call the time ran out. So I decided, well, I'm just going to top it up. It will come back in, right? Do you know that the money that I had on that phone before it expired, I lost? TSTD told me, and I was on the phone. They said, well, once you put money on it, you'll get back the money. So let's round it off to $100. So that $100 has now gone to TSTD, which I have never used. And the money that I put in to top up, to get it back, is all I got. The $20, whatever it was.
You have convinced me. I've
heard of this issue.
Get out of it.
Plenty people saying that their money gone and this and that, but it never happened to me, and this was the first time. And speaking to the individual, which I think really needs some training, that was it. The money that was on the phone for is gone. Even with my alarm vigilance system, when we had a massive blackout, there was the battery backup didn't last long, about 15 minutes. And they said, they're going to make a ticket for it. I had another issue. And I said, well, I don't know, you all said you're making a ticket for it and nobody ever called me. This issue has come up out. Nobody has ever called me. We'll send a technician out. This was months ago. Nobody has called me or arrived at my door.
Well, I suppose that goes to customer service and how effective their customer service is.
Yeah, but that is
as a company at this point, because there is an optics issue that for a lot of Trinidadians and Begonians, they think that TSTT is really I don't want to say in its dying throes, but
that's a real perception. There is a real viability and credibility question, not only among employees who remain, but among the general public. You talk to people generally about TSTT, and there's not a sense of optimism, hope, or confidence in the entity at all.
Yeah. So that's the first thing they'll have to deal with.
Let me tell you this, and I understand that because just in 2018, TSTT went through a restructuring. Just 2018, I believe it was, and now we're in 2022. they're going through another restructuring. So you have to ask yourself, what is taking place within that company? And that's the reason why the government has decided, well, we need to go in and make an assessment as to what is taking place. If you've gone through a restructuring in 2018 and now in 2022, you're going through another restructuring, then we need to make an assessment as to what is taking place there, and so that we can make a policy decision to determine whether or not we should continue to have and to hold 51% shareholding, because the Digicel, they are privately run and they seem to be surviving. But I can tell you, the information I have at my disposal, I believe this restructuring and transformation, I am very optimistic that it is going to be a successful transformation. And moving towards the end of the year, I believe that the figures will start to demonstrate that you have a utility company that is in resurgence once more. I will say that I would just leave it there on that. But
but I know the government.
This is not something that I will say lightly. Understand
Is there a timeline on that committee's decision?
I spoke to the chairperson of the committee, and she indicated to me that she wants to wrap up within 2 to 3 weeks.
I know government will, of course, have its plans for digitization and moving the country forward. And I know there are plans for ARIMA to be some sort of smart city prototype, which I have read about in the newspapers, and which we had spoken to Penelope Beckles-Robinson about before. But I'm just wondering how serious Trinidad is about innovation in that sector when we don't even have 5G. And countries are now starting to look beyond 5G.
But the very same TSTT launched 5G 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yes.
That do exist.
Yeah. So I mean, how serious are we if we are not even on the leading edge of even the speed and the availability of those kinds of connections? As far as I know, there's only one provider, for example, that even gives you a gigabyte broadband. Only one, and that's Amplia. And that's Amplia. But that's the only one. And so it seems as if I don't know.
Richard.
I know.
Yeah,
I know Amplia is part of TSTT,
I
but
think that was part of the decision of the company to acquire Amplia. And because of those reasons, it gave TSTT and the company that competitive edge for the very reasons that you're advancing at this point.
yeah. So it just
both don't need to exist then, doing the same thing,
No,
offering the same services.
No. They're not offering the same. Amplia is part of TSTT, and my understanding is that the decision to acquire Amplia was because of those advanced systems that existed within the company, and it would have provided TSTT with that competitive edge, and that's the reason why I'm saying that I believe this restructuring is going to be very successful, because when compared to other telecommunications company within Trinidad and Tobago, TSTT has the competitive edge, but they need to go through this very difficult restructuring exercise, because TSTT is doing very much better than Digicel in terms of its financial performance. I can tell you all that. But when it comes to staff or personnel cost and maintenance, because it's a drag on the financial sustainability.
But it will affect profitability.
And that is the problem. That is the problem, because when compared to its revenues, its staff cost is somewhere in the region of 18 or 24%. Its competitors is somewhere in the region of 9%.
Yeah, which is not the model that works generally globally.
It is not the model that works generally.
Yeah.
But and that's the reason why, unfortunately, the restructuring, because they would have engaged in a number of cost-cutting measures that saved the company nearly $300 million. But they had to continue to grapple with that issue of personnel costs because it was a drag on the company's financial performance. But once that is taken care of, TSTT's financial performance will be far better than its local competitors. And that's the reason I'm telling you, gentlemen, that I believe that once TSTT goes through this transformation, this restructuring, moving towards the end of the year, from a financial perspective, it will be far better than its competitors.
As we end, have a bag of old ties for you, you know. It's a joke. Don't even get involved. Minister, thank you for being with us this morning.
Go ahead and cuss him, you know. Go ahead and cuss him. Go ahead. The mic is yours. Go
No,
ahead.
Steve, don't encourage the man.
No, but
to curse
I
and-
would
and
like
lose him
to,
back and
I should probably want to put a plug in here. With respect to the Northeast plan, I would like perhaps in about a week or two to come into the program and let's have a very expansive discussion. I think it's very exciting.
Looking forward.
Well, yeah. Well,
Yeah?
yeah, but I have a vested interest in that plan working, so absolutely.
Looking
So
forward.
take care and
Thanks a lot.
thanks for the opportunity.
All right.
All right. And don't forget,
Recording stopped.
Barataria, interchange, if you want to call it that, the street light's not working.
All right.
Yeah.
It'll be done. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Nice.
Pull him aboard. Thanks so much, Minister Gonzalez. And let's say
I'm
good
doing the
morning.
news,
And,
Steve.
and sorry, what?
I'm doing the news.
You're doing the news.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Just start the bed now.
oh, hold on. I didn't know that. I was at a setup long time. Hold on. All right. Well, that was Minister Marvin Gonzalez. Let's get into the news. All powered by Champlain Services.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
Good morning. Minister of Public Utilities Marvin Gonzalez says